Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, Superman is on a ninja domination quest for Canon Films. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Thomas Mariani, and I just came back from golfing. There was a ninja attack, but everything's cool. I just have one of those, throwing stars in my forehead. But I'm totally good. Only a bit of blood's coming out. Everything's great.
And I am Adam Thomas, and I have a digitized version of Gene Hackman's voice.
Oh, wow, really digitized? Like you couldn't recognize it at all. Sounds a lot worse.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Pull out some Royal Tenenbaums quotes. Start going, let's shag ass.
Well, who stabbed you, Grandpa? We did.
Well, welcome everybody to the Double-Edged Double Bill, where every week Adam and I cover a good and a bad movie we picked at the end of the previous episode. We're still in November, so we're still doing our Revember theme month, in which we revisit topics we've done previously. And, most of these have been tied to, some recent film that's come out or something like that. But this one, for the Thanksgiving holidays, which, happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there who celebrate.
Yeah.
We decided, what? We love talking about Canon Films, so we're revisiting that. The great production company that was run by Golan and Globus that started in the late 70s and lasted throughout most of the 80s until, the very early 90s, they completely fell apart. It's a fascinating bunch of movies that are known for schlocky, cheesy, just hilarity from that era.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, and the thing is, if anybody is a 80s schlock fan of, action or really cheesy horror and all that, chances are you've seen a Canon film. I mean, I can almost guarantee it.
Lots of, the genres of whether it be horror, action, science fiction.
Sci-fi, yeah.
Right. Yeah, they were known for making sort of these smaller budget initially movies that were just kind of try to capitalize on some big trend or try to do some kind of weird and offbeat, and often raked in profits until the company became way too big for its own britches and started making bigger schlock, which I would argue the 2 movies we're covering tonight fit both ends of that pretty well.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Definitely.
And if you haven't, definitely try and seek out the it's Electric Boogaloo, which is the documentary that's about Canon Films. That's amazing. That gives you the entire run-through, basically, of what it is. Though I will say, Adam, I also did just recently watch, remember at the end of that movie, how they teased that, Golan and Globus didn't do any interviews because they were making a competing documentary that came out 3 months prior to that documentary coming out?
Yes.
I also watched that documentary because I found out that was available. And it's called The Go-Go Boys. And that documentary is also fascinating because it's mainly a puff piece.
Oh, of course it is.
Right, because shockingly they participate in it, so therefore it's a puff piece. But there's a lot of interesting things about their early career because they were Israeli filmmakers who came over and wanted to make Hollywood movies. But it talks a lot about their early Israeli careers and how they kind of met up with each other a lot more than the other documentary had. And then also there are 2 masterful little interview bits. One involving Monheim Golan when addressing the bad feature for tonight. But someone was like, so I want to talk about Superman 4 with you a bit about your failures. And he's like, why would you want to talk to me about my failures? If a failure happens, I completely cast it out from my mind. It didn't happen. There's that. And then also, they actually got to interview Jean-Claude Van Damme and how he got the Bloodsport job. And he's literally at a palatial estate that is he's over by the pool. And it's this massive poolside area. And he's just being very candid about trying to get a job from Canon and then crying in Golan's office and they're being fine, here, give me the Bloodsport movie. You want to be movie star? Here, I'll make you a movie star. That's how we got Bloodsport.
Hey, it worked though.
It
because he
works, yeah.
definitely became a huge movie star.
For sure, for sure. And what do you think makes sort of a canon distinctive, especially amongst, like, we've covered plenty of 80s schlock elsewhere. What do you think makes sort of the canon schlock distinctive to you?
Because it's earnest and it's schlock. Like that's the thing. You watch those documentaries, either the Electric Boogaloo or it sounds like the Go-Go Boys. They genuinely thought they were making like Academy Award quality pictures. Like there is no question. They thought that they were changing the game every time they were working on a big movie. I mean, they honestly thought like Sahara was going to be an Academy Award winning picture. I mean, they thought Masters of the Universe was going to be, save their studio and let them, make sequels and all these things. They thought Toby Hooper was going to just blow the door off for them as far as getting into the genre and stuff, which in a way he did, but he did not do what they thought he was going to do. I mean, that's why I love it so much. And when you talk about it's one of our favorite subgenres of film, period, is where someone, not from the US or from America comes over and tries to make a movie with sort of American cliche sort of beats to it and things like that. It's always off, but it makes it for a really fun time. Everything they've done has that sort of, eh, the thing that they had their fingers in every pie all the time.
Yeah, but I think that the bigger distinction to me is that Golden Globus didn't just want to be like filmmakers that did that, because we've talked about other filmmakers that like come over and like would make these movies in the 80s. They're like, once again, the foreign filmmaker trying to make an American movie, but they didn't just want to be filmmakers. Like Golan was the guy who actually made movies. Like he directed The Apple and Over the Top and some of these other ones. But Globus was also like the big, like the money guy. And the both of them wanted to be like old school moguls like you would have had in older Hollywood. Like they wanted to be Louis B. Mayer, but for the 80s, basically. Where they're just like, we're greenlighting all sorts of movies. Like to the degree that if you watch that Electric Boogaloo documentary, the fascinating thing is they were always making a lot of movies at any point. But by the time they were like in there, we're going broke because like we owe the bank $5 million. So the only solution clearly is to spend way more money so we can make that money back. Like in 87, which is when one of our movies that we're talking about today came out, they had 30 fucking movies that came out theatrically. That's like insane for an independent studio. And it's that weird influx where we're gonna like make all these movies but at the same time cut so many of the budgets, including on say Masters of the Universe, which was also 87, and the movie we're gonna be talking about tonight, our bad pick. We could have benefited from like cutting out a couple of those other movies and putting it toward your bigger movies instead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. Gotta love them though, man. You gotta love them. Like I said, it's just so earnest and what they're trying to do, and just whether it's want to be businessmen or moguls or filmmakers or whatever it is, they held on to the last minute possible. And yeah, I mean, if anything, you got to give them credit.
Oh, for sure. And I also would give them credit for the fact that, like, you know, the bigger studios like MGM, Warner Brothers, all that, they have their distinctive, like, logos and stuff like that. But I feel like out of all of the various production companies that weren't one of the major ones, like an independent studio kind of thing, I think Canon has the most distinctive sort of brand, and, like, that logo is amazing and all that. I think you wouldn't have some of the other production companies that have created their own sort of brands, like Neon or even A24, to a certain extent, owe some of that to Canon in terms of not necessarily the specific type of movie they're making, but that kind of, you know, immediate stamp of like, oh, I know what this is. This is a Canon movie, versus like all the way down to like, oh, this is an A24 movie, a Neon movie, whatever. Like they owe a bit of credit to Canon for blazing the trails in their own unique way for that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even like early New Line and stuff like that is 100%
Yes,
canon
for sure.
for
Yeah.
sure.
A bit more contemporaneous, I guess, at the time
Yeah,
with that.
yeah.
But yes, but at the same time, yeah, I totally agree that Canon, they have that distinctive look. Even like as someone who my entire lifetime was post Canon, I still know of Canon. I had heard legends of Canon films and seen some of these movies, and like there's a definite sort of like stamp and interesting asset to that. Plus also like Golden Globus in that documentary, there's so much stuff like when they went to Cannes and they're wearing those fucking Canon sweatsuits. Love it.
Oh, it's the
Love it
best.
so much. Those terrible bright blue sweats that I would wear to every family function if I could get them.
Oh, dude, if I could get a hold of those, are you kidding me? You better believe it. Thanksgiving, I'm strolling right into my mother-in-law's kitchen wearing that.
I hadn't been wearing it for a week. You haven't washed it.
Oh, that's what the problem is. I see.
Well, now we gotta talk about our two movies, Adam, that we picked at the end of our last episode. First, we'll start off with my good pick, Ninja 3: The Domination, and then your bad pick of Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. But let's go ahead and jump into our good feature, Ninja 3: The Domination.
He is the most feared and powerful warrior. A ninja who breaks from ancient tradition and explodes onto America. His soul possesses the body of an innocent woman and transforms her into a lethal assassin. Who are you?
Only a ninja can destroy a ninja.
Her only hope is Yamada, the master ninja, who has been sent to destroy him. Where Revenge of the Ninja left off, Ninja 3 begins. An epic struggle of superhuman strength and supernatural forces. Ninja 3: The Domination.
So Ninja 3: The Domination came out September 14th, 1984, from director Sam Furstenberg, who directed a lot of canon films, including he had directed one of the two previous Ninja movies, which we should state outright that while this is Ninja 3: The Domination, the other two Ninja movies, one, aren't called just Ninja 1 or 2. They're called Enter the Ninja and Revenge of the Ninja. And there is no continuity of any sort. The only connection is that they were all made by Canon Films, and they all feature Sho Kazuki, who was an actual Ninpo practitioner, which means he actually knew martial arts. And this is part of the weird sort of like canon run of ninja movies, where basically with the first one of those, Enter the Ninja, that came out in 1981, they kind of started the American ninja craze that happened. And they also made plenty of other ninja movies, like Revenge of the Ninja, and also the, I believe, 5 American ninja movies.
Yeah, buddy.
Right. There are a lot of those. And yeah, so they made a solid hit with Enter the Ninja, and Revenge of the Ninja was still quite popular. And I'm curious, Adam, we've talked about martial arts movies, but we've never really talked about ninja movies specifically, right? I don't think we have.
No, we have not.
So how do you feel about that sort of subgenre in general, as a bigger martial arts fan than me?
I fucking love it. I absolutely love ninja movies. Ninja movies as a kid, for me, were like the shit. We always would play ninjas. Any of our action figures that had masks that even looked similar to ninjas were automatically now they're ninjas. I mean, I just loved. I still do. I'm a huge fan of the ninja subgenre. I mean, I even showed you like Ninja Assassin, which I love, which is lunacy. But even Sho Kazuki shows up in that. But yeah, I was a huge fan of the American Ninja movies. I'm a fan of the Enter the Ninja movies. I have the posters for all 3 of them. It's just absolutely love it. I think it is one of my favorite sort of offshoots of a subgenre. It's an offshoot of martial arts action movies, and you got ninja movies because they can go from just real sort of violent and fun to now it's like real fantastical. There's magic. There's just crazy shit happening. Nobody can kill a ninja. They could phase in and out of shadow, spin tornado like into the ground. Why not? They can do moves with their fingers and automatically heal their bodies. Like it's just, I fucking love it. I think it's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been, like I've said before, I'm not the hugest martial arts person, but I always kind of like the idea of a ninja in terms of just, like, it's not too far removed from, like, superhero, basically, in terms of, like, because, there's the connection with, like, the G.I. Joe, you had the Snake Eyes.
Snake Eyes and Storm
yeah.
Shadow.
Right, where they would integrate, like, the ninja aspect into that, and it's literally, like, a masked Avenger sort of, like, person with like specific powers, quote unquote, to some degree, which I guess gets into more problematic territory when you have, in this case, Israeli producers making these like ninja movies that are just like, okay, this feels kind of like, we're kind of co-opting this kind of like
that star white
Japanese
people.
culture.
That star white people.
Oh, especially the worst of those is I watched the other 2 ninja movies in prep for this. Enter the Ninja, where you have Franco Nero. Right.
And he's horribly dubbed.
Oh, the worst.
I don't know, man. The American Ninja movies with Michael Dudikoff Pretty bad, dude. Pretty bad.
I mean, yeah, and also a worse name than Franco Nero. Great name. And also obviously Django of the Italian
Yeah.
westerns. But yeah, very badly dubbed. And I just love Sho Kazuki being so upset about, like, why is he accepted more than me? And I'm like, you know what, Sho? I completely agree with you. This guy isn't very good at being a ninja.
Yeah, that's horseshit, bro. I'd be
It's
pissed too.
such horseshit, yeah, for sure. So End of the Ninja, I'm kind of so on. Revenge of the Ninja is really fun because it
Yeah,
has
it's great.
Sho as in the main lead, and also his son Kane, who's adorable in that movie, and also kicks a lot of ass despite being like 7 or whatever. There's so many good things. Particularly, I love that fucking like gang that Sho Kazuki and his buddies fight on the playground. That's the guy with the headphones and the cowboy. So good.
So good.
So fucking great. But yeah, that led to eventually Ninja 3 The Domination, which, as I said, has no connection to those other 2 movies. We start off with this ninja's going off into a cave in the middle of sunny California, where he's looking around like, let me get my, throwing stars and my swords and everything all together. And then after the opening credits end, we cut to a golf course, and we proceed to have this ninja murder everybody on this golf course. And then the police come in. Basically, this ninja racks up like 5 stars on GTA within the first 10 minutes of the fucking movie. And if you thought it's like, wow, this is so bizarre, is the movie gonna slow down from here? Not really. It's gonna get weirder from here. But just that opening alone sets you up for like, this is even weirder than the other 2 ninja movies by like a mile.
Yeah, the killing and all that might slow down after that first 10 minutes, but it just gets so fucking crazy. Like, you would think, how is this going to get crazier? This guy is literally just getting shot at by the police, and he's just killing fucking everyone. He's taking out helicopters.
He uses a poison dart on a gun, which explodes in a guy's hands, which is the best.
It's great. I mean, the accuracy. Mwah.
The guy hangs from a helicopter, goes up next to the helicopter, puts a fucking throwing star in between his feet, and stabs the helicopter pilot in the head with it.
Kick throws it into the pilot, yeah.
Right, but from the complete opposite end, by the way, in which he would have actually been able to hit him from.
Oh, yeah, no, well, of course, ninja magic, bro.
Right.
I mean, that's your answer for everything in this movie. But it's like, how can this possibly get nuttier? Well, then he meets this really young, svelte line worker, and it just goes batshit crazy.
Well, yeah, because like he's been shot up horribly by the police at this point, and his last dying acts are walking over to Lucinda Dickey, who plays Christy Ryder, who was a big Canon star at this time. Interestingly, she shot this as her first Canon film of 1984, but right afterwards she went back-to-back shooting on Breakin' and Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. She had a very busy 84 with Canon. And she, like, encounters this ninja who's dying, and the 2 of them lock eyes, and that means that, naturally, that ninja's soul is in her body.
Yep.
Of course.
Because that's what happens.
Yes. As you do.
We all know. Yeah. Right, of course. As it should be. Yeah. And then she proceeds to, like, just dance and do aerobics a lot. Date possibly the hairiest young man I've ever seen in my life, who's really grossly weird, like persistent, and then it just turns into, yeah, let's do it. And you're like, okay.
Well, okay, the weird process where Jordan Benton, who you're talking about, is Billy Secord, is this cop who meets her as she's being interviewed post like the ninja attack, and he's creepily looking over, not even being the one interviewing her, just being like, oh, look at her, hey, hey, you want to go out for some coffee? It's like, no thanks, I gotta work out. Coffee's bad for you. And then she goes over to aerobics class where he has followed her, then proceeds to follow her as she leaves, and then finds one of her aerobics students who's being accosted by some dudes outside, and she kicks their ass while the cop guy and the rest of the crowd is watching outside, just like, huh? Oh.
I mean,
oh wow.
Only from feet away, too.
Right.
Like, that's the thing. I remember, like, rewatching it for this, and I'm seeing, like, at least 5-6 other dudes, not to mention the police officer in the fucking group. And they're just watching. They're like, whoa, man, whoa. Why wouldn't you stop this from happening? Like, what the fuck is happening here? It's great.
But the thing is, after that fight happens, he comes over to her and is just like, all right, that's it. You follow me. You're being arrested for assault. And then they cuts to them driving, And she's like, look, I don't know why you're doing this to me. She's like, it's fine. I was just teasing. I'm not going to arrest you. Want to go back to your place? Yeah, sure, actually. And
They bang. There's no question. They bang.
right. They bang, of
She
course.
pours
because of
the whatever on her throat.
Oh, excuse me. It's V8 juice.
Oh yeah,
Sir.
I forgot. Oh God. Oh God.
She's put not just down her throat, but like down her neck in front of her. Like that's erotic.
And then he's like, "Bleh," and they get into it, and then they wake up in bed next to each other, and that's when the possessed sword makes its first appearance.
Right. And those of you out there who are probably very confused, don't worry. This is pretty much the play-by-play.
It gets worse. It gets crazier.
That's going down here, because this is basically, it's a combination of obviously like the ninja craze that was going on at the time, but also The Exorcist, clearly with the possession element. There's other like exorcisty elements that happen after this point. And then also Flashdance, because it is so clear that Lucinda Dickey is trying to be made up to look like Jennifer Beals as much as possible in this movie. And also being like the lady who loves to dance, but also her main job is like something incredibly masculine by comparison. It's just like, it is so Flashdance. And that's what I love about this movie, really. I saw this before I saw any of the other ninja movies or whatever, and I just found this movie fucking fascinating. This is such a weird, bizarre movie that could have only been made in 1984, when it was considered a good idea to have those three sorts of movies mixed together. And it's magic, Adam.
No, it genuinely is. It has some very unfortunate eye makeup.
There are points, where you see Lucinda Dickey when she's really possessed, because the demon comes in and out of possessing her, basically. Sometimes she's Lucinda Dickey, but then the sword will show up, or her fucking apartment arcade cabinet will shoot lasers on her face, and it'll indicate that she is possessed by her eye makeup, which is, a bit more slanted and awkward.
Yeah, pretty rough.
Yeah, pretty rough. Though I would still say the most racist element of this is the fact that you have Chinese-American James Hong dressed up in full Japanese garb.
With a weird mole on his face for no reason?
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with that, but it's just that is even more specifically racist in a very clear, like, what? He's an Asian guy. That's right. That's all that matters, right? Golden Globes, that's all they care about. Truly
it was. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, that, and like I said, my dude's body hair is just so disgusting to me. Like, it's a lot. Like, it's a lot of body hair.
You can tell that Jordan Bennett was really trying hard to be like, I can be like Elliot Gould, right? I can pull that off, right? It's like,
yeah,
no, buddy.
I'm just like Eugene Levy. Wait a minute, buddy.
I would argue Elliot Gould is what he was going for. Eugene Levy is more what he ended up with, I would say.
Yeah, maybe like Eugene Levy and fucking Robin Williams' weird love child. That explains the body hair.
He's more hair than man.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hair man. But no, it's just, this movie is just perfect canon film. Like, you get them sometimes. Like, even on our last time we did canon films, we did, what was it? We did Death Wish 3 and
Invasion USA.
And Invasion USA. I'd also put both of those at, like, if you want to watch canon films or tell someone to watch them, those are two that I would also recommend. But this one would probably be right near the top, where it's like, you gotta watch Ninja 3. Like, if you want to see a movie that not only, like you said, could be made only in the 1984, but also only by Canon Films. Only Canon Films would be like, let's mix The Exorcist, a ninja movie, and Flashdance together.
Well, plus it kind of covers like 3 different quadrants of canon, because they did all sorts of genre stuff, but they did plenty of ninja movies, they did plenty of weird horror movies, and they did plenty of like, the break-in movies like we mentioned earlier, just like movies that are catching in on like some kind of modern trend, in this case, aerobics. So it's just like, let's mash them all together, because that's the weirder thing, it's just canon could have made 3 separate movies, but they're like, oh no, they all got stuck in a pot. We can't get them out. And now we have this.
Fuck it. Roll it. I mean, 100%. It's ridiculous. It's amazing. There's plenty of violence in it. There's attractive people. There's just weird, subtle racism, which is not necessarily a thing to be attracted to, but
not the selling point necessarily, I would say. That's maybe the one detriment I would argue.
Yeah, no, I would say, yeah, of course. But it's a canon film. They did that a lot. Like, a lot, just because they just didn't really care. I guess they're just like, fuck it, make it work. So it's one of those movies where it's wild, dude. It's a wild fucking movie. Like, and then she goes and starts, we didn't even mention how, once she's possessed, she goes and starts killing cops.
Yep, all the cops that were on the scene who murdered her. Yeah.
When she kills the one in the fucking hot tub with, when he's with those two girls, and then she goes into the fucking room and poisons him, I think, and then slices the other one's chest open and then drowns the other one.
Well, what you're missing also is the fact that as he's initially like, Lucinda Dickey comes down and is just like starts making out with that guy, and the other two ladies are making this elaborate commentary, just like, oh my god, who is she? Oh, she's so weird. Oh, great, thanks, guy. Like they're just like so badly ADR'd, like narrating this whole situation.
What the fuck? It's great. Oh, it's so dumb. Like, but then like when she breaks into the one guy's house, it looks like he lives in a shack with just a pool table in it.
Right.
She breaks in and kills him by kicking him in the face out of a window. It's lunacy. But ultimately we kind of gloss over a little bit. But Sho Kazuki is in this one too. He shows up as someone who's trying to get revenge against the titular ninja, who the one that's possessed her.
Right, because the whole thing is the original ninja killed Sho Kazuki's father and stabbed out his eye. So he has an eye patch, a pretty cool looking eye patch.
It is a pretty cool looking eye patch.
Right, even though it has like a coin slot looking thing in the middle, I'm just like, if 100%. I put that in, is that what makes Sho Kazuki do his ninja magic or whatever?
Well, two things. One is obviously that's there so he could see out of it, but two, it also looks like the sort of the blade guard on a sword.
Right.
Like it looks like that might be what they were going for, where that was like the part of a sword.
But I will say that's the thing that I think makes this distinctive to me from like say Enter the Ninjas, like this and Revenge of the Ninja, while at the same time they have some of these uncomfortable stereotypes and don't appreciate. At the same time, both of them let Sho Kazuki show how much of a fucking badass he is.
Oh, for sure. Once he enters the picture and he gets rolling, like when he starts showing up and disappearing and then beating the shit out of random security guards and cops and mortuary workers and all. Like, it gets really fun. Like, the whole movie's fun, but it gets really fun. And then, obviously, it culminates in his epic fucking magic ninja fight, which is great.
But in between, there's some great, like, fight sequences that... Initially, there's one that is at a funeral where a bunch of cops try and face off against possessed Lucinda Dickey, and they get the shit beat out of them once again. And then that leads into Sho Kazuki fighting off against possessed Lucinda Dickey in, like, an abandoned house, which is a genuinely great fight sequence.
Yeah, it's great.
Like a lot of them going through like different trappings, and at one point, possessed Lucinda Dickey like jumps through the second story of the building up to where Sho Kazuki is. It's like, this is fucking dope. It's just really good fight choreography and shit.
Yeah, it's fucking great.
And throughout all this, there's all sorts of like fun details too. Like I kind of mentioned this earlier, but Lucinda Dickey's apartment. That is like the weirdest apartment possible, that has like the arcade cabinet and like a diving suit and like lockers and other shit. Like just like this, the idea of like, oh, this is what a quirky apartment would be. Like once again, Jennifer Beals' character from Flashdance times 10 with how ridiculous this apartment looks. And at one point, the arcade cabinet manages to like send some lasers at Lucinda Dickey's face, and she starts like doing a weird possession thing that feels like a weird 80s music video. It's bizarre shit. And also the sword, which you mentioned, that like shows up occasionally, that's like it glows and just like this flies in. I have the Blu-ray, and you can clearly see the string. It's so magical. It's just obviously there.
Yeah, it's a glowing ninja sword that floats, I mean, via string, but still. Yeah, it's fucking great. It's just, like I said, it's silly, it's ridiculous, it's just so over the top, and like, what the fuck am I watching? But that's sort of what endears it the most, where it's this wild, wacky shit that could only exist this one movie. I could never see somebody redoing something like this and it being successful,
right? Or having near the amount of charm that this has, because it's just very sincere about like, oh, we'll appeal to like a 3-quadrant audience of horror fans and action fans and Flashdance fans, and they'll all come to see Ninja 3: The Domination, which was not the case. This kind of ended the at least the initial ninja craze, though the American ninja movies would come shortly after this and just do other interesting things beyond that. But I think what makes this work so well is that it's like you mentioned, like it's just this natural charm that could only come from like trying to like combine all these genres sincerely, but also doing it in the most backwards ways, like the finale that happens, which you kind of referenced earlier, that occurs at this temple that's like off on a hill, and Lucinda Dickey's like gets exorcised of this demon. At least this isn't the first attempt, though, because there was obviously the thing with James Hong, which we didn't really mention that much, but it's one of the most bizarre sequences with her as like a doll that's like floating around and shit. It's so good. Such an amazing bad doll. And then during this attempt, she actually does get the demon sucked out of her at the very end. But that causes like the original ninja and Shokazuki to fight each other, and also the monks that show up, and also there's shit and all this like weird like 80s like lightning effects and shit like that. It's so amazing and leads up to literal like earthquakes happening, and more importantly, Lucinda Dickey and Jordan Bennett just watching the whole finale. They have nothing to do for like the last 15 minutes of this fucking movie.
I know. They're just watching and like staring and smiling. Like legitimately. They're just smiling.
Right, and so Lucinda Dickey like comes up for the killing blow, and it's like, yeah, I did, and Shokazuki's looking like, motherfucker, I did all this, and you get the killing blow?
Well, you think she does. He really does, though. He stabs that motherfucker in the top of the skull.
Yes, right. But at least in that moment, he looks just like, motherfucker, did you just do that?
Which, my favorite part, and then, of the ending, and I don't mean to do play-by-play, but when he's climbing up the grappling hook to sort of get out from falling 5 feet, because that's clearly what it is. There's clearly ground just right there. But he climbs the grappling hook, and he finally gets up, and it's such a huge struggle. He's like, oh, God. And then he just walks down the hill. It's like, you were already down there, man. You were just there. It's fucking great. I love it so much.
I mean, yeah, in terms of my favorite thing about the finale is definitely like when those like weird monks come out of nowhere. Because we just assume initially like, oh, this temple's like completely empty. And then the moment that dude resurrects in his own body and Shokazuki starts fighting him, they all come out of the woodwork to start fighting. Like, where were you guys? What were you doing off to the side? Just like doing jack shit. And it's like, oh, possessed ninja resurrection. I gotta go over and fight. And they are wasted immediately. Like the ninja guy just has to like touch them and they're like, oh.
I know. Oh yeah, they do nothing. Yeah, 100%.
They're just cannon fodder. Cannon fodder.
Hey.
So Adam, would you say maybe then that this is your favorite of the cannons, or just like in the upper echelon?
It's top tier. Yeah, I mean maybe not my favorite, but it's in the upper echelon. Absolutely. I mean this is damn near a perfect movie. It's so fun. I mean it's perfect and as ridiculous as it is, but it's so fun.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely like perfectly entertaining in a way that like is mostly very unintentionally funny, but at the same time it's just like it has this consistent energy and complete lack of like nothing's gonna like stop in terms of momentum. We are just going forward right from, like I mentioned, right after that opening credit sequence when that golf course massacre happens for like 10 minutes of the opening. Like from there it does not really stop, because even if it stops for like a breather, quote unquote, just weird shit's going on, and then it's the most 80s-tastic movie possible with just like, oh look, here's this in our aerobics garb and we're just chilling out here, and like I'm in my apartment that has all like an arcade cabinet, all this other bullshit that's around, and just also hilarious lines like the bit where she's talking to the doctor and it's just like, well, I don't know, there doesn't seem to be much wrong with you except for your love of exercise and an affinity for Japanese culture. No harm in that. Like, what? Why are we mentioning that at the doctor's appointment?
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. Exactly. Like, A, did she tell the doctor that she had affinity for Japanese culture? Or B, is that doctor just guessing? Because either way, weird.
Harsh to assume that she's an otaku.
Yeah, right.
Right, for sure.
Right.
On that. But, yeah, and we've been talking quite a bit, and we have another movie to talk about. So, final thoughts on Ninja 3, The Domination.
It's fucking great, man. It's super fun. It's a good time, no matter what, no matter where you watch it, how you watch it, when you watch it. You're gonna have a good time. It's pure lunacy and just outrageousness and one dumb idea after another that somehow all melds together to make it come out the other side kind of brilliant. It's fucking crazy.
Yep, and all in a 92-minute package. Another great thing about canon, just like they were in and out. We didn't need to waste too much time. It's all that shit in 92 minutes.
Oh, you got to figure it's probably closer to 80 minutes because the credits are fucking forever.
Right, that's true. Yes, they probably a bit more, yeah. But regardless, the fact that it's so compact despite all of that shit going on, it's a tremendous time, completely agree. One of the top tier canon films. A great example of like what I love about canon, where it's just this like very sincere depiction of just like, let's try and get in on as many trends as possible. Like I said previously, canon would usually make like 3 different movies out of this movie, but they're still at the point here where it's just like, I don't know, how about we combine all of them? And it's kind of like the best version of Hat in a Hat, where it's just like, there's the comedic concept of like, oh, 1 hat is funny, 2 hats makes it weird just to cancel out the joke. This is like, no, fucking 3 hats, we're doing it. And you're like, you know what? You wear those 3 hats well, Ninja 3 the Domination. You wear those hats. You're great at it. So yeah, for sure, definitely. If you have not seen any canon film, this is a great example of like the entree. It's a sample platter, as it were, of what you can get from canon films in general. But now, Adam, it's time we get to our bad feature, the rather infamous feature that partially brought on the end of canon. Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
The countdown has begun.
Should we risk not launching?
The world is on the brink.
Prepare the counterattack.
And only one man can save us now.
What a scoop! Effective immediately, I'm going to rid our planet of all nuclear weapons.
But the greatest threat to Superman is Lex Luthor. He's created a being more powerful than the Man of Steel.
Well, smarter than I thought.
You'll pierce his skin.
Dance on his grave.
Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, Jackie Cooper, John Cryer, with Mariel Hemingway, and Margot Kidder. Superman 4, his greatest adventure, The Quest for Peace.
So, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, came out July 24th, 1987, from director Sidney J. Furie. And, there's a bit of backstory to this one as well, because obviously this is the 4th in the original Superman series of films that starred Christopher Reeve. This is the last one of those, unfortunately. I guess we should kind of start with that, Adam, with your thoughts on, that sort of original trilogy of Superman films starring Christopher Reeve. What do you think of those movies?
I think the first one's pretty fucking great. I think the second one's a masterpiece, and I think the third one's a huge swing and a miss. I mean, I'd argue the third one might be worse than Quest for Peace.
On the strength of the fact that it's 2 hours long versus this one's 90 minutes alone, that makes it a worse movie.
It's worse. But, I mean, like I said, the first one's fucking great. And the second one's a masterpiece, given on the strength of even the villains and Terrence Stamp, Azad, and all that. They're great. And of course, Christopher Reeve, is a great Superman. He's, probably the first one that most people know. I mean, obviously there was George Reeves and all that stuff too, back in the old serial days and all that. But Christopher Reeve's just fantastic. I mean, it's a hard sort of legacy to follow. I think that's sort of been the problem with a lot of the modern day iterations of the character, even with Brandon Routh, who I thought was pretty solid. I mean, very Chris Reeve like.
Yeah, not helped by like that movie's so hard trying to be like, no, we are the official Superman 3.
1,000%. And then you got the Henry Cavill version, who I actually do like quite a bit. I know it's like darker and all that stuff, but I think he as Superman really works.
The problem's not him with those.
No, the problem is definitely not. No, the problem is definitely not him. I think he's fucking pretty much perfectly cast for Superman. But we'll see where it goes from there. Now that James Gunn's taken over and all that, we'll see what happens to the character.
And now that Black Adam has completely reshaped the structure of the DC universe, as we all know.
Right? Yeah. There's a new power, whatever the fuck it is.
Whatever Dwayne Johnson's saying.
Whatever the fuck he's saying. Who the hell knows? Drink Terramata, Zao energy drinks.
And also my tequila. But anyway.
Yeah, hey bro, hey, blah, 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 blah. Fuck you.
Follow me on Instagram, cheat day, big sack of pancakes.
Pancakes and chicken.
But yeah, I mean, I generally agree with you. I would say, I rewatched actually the first Superman right before I watched Superman 4, which was an interesting sort of like the two ends of that spectrum kind of thing. But I think the first Superman is like nearly a perfect movie. I would just argue like when it gets more like Irwin Allen disastery by the end of that movie and like the time travel stuff, I'm not as huge on, but like especially the opening bits, like the whole origin is so beautifully put together. It feels less like a superhero movie of modern, more like an old school epic film that just happens to fall around a superhero. That's like so tremendously done. And then I'm one of those guys where I would argue the theatrical cut of Superman 2 is a mess, given obviously like there's the Richard Donner stuff versus the Richard Lester stuff. The Lester stuff ages like a fine milk against the fine wine of the Donner stuff, which is why I love the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. I think that's the masterpiece.
Yeah, I guess I should have been a little more specific. I agree with you 100%.
Right.
The Donner cut is a masterpiece. The theatrical cut, it's still got some fun bits, but yeah, it's messy as fuck.
Yeah, and most of the great bits that are in that one are in the Donner cut anyway. But then, yeah, I would say Superman 3, I would say, is the low point of those movies because it's barely even a Superman movie. It's way more of like, let's have Richard Pryor riff for a PG rating, and occasionally Superman will show up and do something. It's really, really just like completely running on nothing. So Superman 4 comes out about 4 years after that one, because that was 83, this is 87. And Canon Films ended up getting the rights because the Salkins were disappointed by how Superman 3 kind of went. And also Supergirl had happened and was very much not a success whatsoever. So in a move that would never, ever, 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 ever happen again, the Salkins were like, oh, let's sell off these comic book rights for like Superman, I guess, whatever, to Canon. That'd be like if Warner Brothers was like, let's not do another Superman movie. Hey, Asylum, do a Superman movie. We'll distribute it. We just don't want to make it.
Well, I mean, they at one point either had or almost had the rights to fucking Spider-Man, Canon Films.
Well, yeah, that was the thing, is that I love that story. Like, there was so many movies in production around this time in 87. Like, in 87, they released 30 fucking movies, like I said earlier, and they would literally do the thing where they would shop around promotional material to get distributors and, like, investors interested before they ever shot a frame of film. So they did have a Spider-Man movie.
With Michael Dudikoff.
Right, well, they originally had, like, that was at least in any of the test footage, was a guy named Scott Leva, who was the stuntman, who they were gonna say, like, oh, you just do the test shots, then we'll get Dudikoff. But then they were like, oh, we won't get Dudikoff, that's too much money, so we'll get you, stuntman, to do this. And I love that they originally bought the rights when they didn't know what Spider-Man was, so they were originally gonna give it to Tobe Hooper to make into, like, a Fly movie, where it was, like, Spider-Man with, like, 8 arms and shit, and it was gonna be a body horror movie.
I love that shit so much.
So much. I wish that would have existed. I want that so badly. But then they were going to make another one with Joe Zito, and it was going to be more traditional Spider-Man. It was going to have actually Stan Lee as J. Jonah Jameson, was their original idea to be involved. But that ended up completely falling apart when, shocker, both Superman 4: The Quest for Peace and Masters of the Universe, which we've talked about previously on the show, totally bombed hard at the box office this particular year. And, to get to the movie at hand, Adam, Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, has it earned its sort of reputation as being a bottom-of-the-barrel superhero movie?
Yes. Yes, at least in my opinion, yes. It's pretty fucking bad, dude. Like, say what you will, like I said, the Richard Pryor one, because the length to it and all that, it's really bad. But this one, even being shorter, is so fucking boring to me. It is so boring. I do not care about anything that's happening. The performances are so hacky and just nobody really gives a shit. I mean, Christopher Reeve kinda, but everybody else in it is like, Gene Hackman doesn't give a shit. Margot Kidder is already like full into Margot Kidder at the times, like breakdown.
That would happen in the 90s, but we're not too sadly far off from that. It feels
no,
like
right?
Yeah. She was struggling with like mental health stuff around this time.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious, and you got Hemingway, who I can't stand. We just talked about her on our fucking werewolf episode. It's just, and then John Cryer, who is just horribly annoying in this movie.
What are you talking about, bro? Breakdance.
Well, I was just kidding about the goof thing or the freak show. It's just, it's dumb. It's dumb. I mean, I get it that Not a terrible idea for Superman to put an end to the nuclear arms race. Kind of.
No, which was Christopher Reeve, like, the main reason he was courted was because he wanted to pitch this as a story for Superman to do.
Kind of a cool idea. I think it's a really cool idea. But then you get Nuclear Man out of it, which is fucking ridiculous. Look, much like our previous movie where it's like the shit that doesn't work, which makes it great, nothing works in this one, but the things that really don't work are the only reason it's watchable. The special effects.
Yes.
Be it the green screen or the miniatures or anything. It's so fucking bad. I mean, they repeat the same fucking shot of Christopher Reeve flying 20 times easily.
Yep. It's very clear they use the same,
Easily.
like, 15 seconds of him, like, in the chroma key office, and it's just, like, him flying, like, look, he's through the subway.
He's going in space. Look, he's chasing Nuclear Man. Look, it's the beginning of the movie where he's flying up into space to save a Russian cosmonaut. Look, it's nonstop. But it's fucking great. That's the only reason this movie has any charm to it, at least in my opinion. The scene with him, with the fucking Statue of Liberty, I mean, get the fuck out of here.
Right, there's a point where the Statue of Liberty, like, in the fight between him and Nuclear Man, where it's being carried off by Nuclear Man, and then it's dropped at one point. There is a shot when it's just falling, and you see the full Statue of Liberty, like, up front, where it's like, this is like Monty Python cutout animation.
Oh,
This looks
1000%.
rough.
It's some little, like, shitty tourist shop fucking statue that they're just dropping, and then all of a sudden, here comes Superman catching it by the one hand and flying in front of a fucking green screen building that warps as he flies up. Like, you can literally see it start to, like, shift and everything.
Oh, I mean, any of the people who are on green screens, you can see, like, that weird line.
Yes.
That's like, you didn't finish this. A big thing with this one was, this was in the middle of Canon being so bullish about, like, no, we're going to put out all, like, 30 fucking movies and we're going to have them all in production at the same time. To the degree that throughout pre-production, it was going to be a $36 million budget. And then right before they started shooting, they cut it to 17.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yep, big fucking problem.
That's a pretty massive issue. That they
Yeah,
have
there's a
there.
great, during that Canon film, the Electric Boogaloo documentary, they interviewed, like, the main special effects person for Superman 4, who was just, like, talking about one point, like, oh, everyone was saying, like, you're a failure, you fucked this up, and it's like, yeah, because we only had $17 million fucking dollars for the whole movie. It's like, yep, I get it, dude, because, like, you can tell that all this stuff, like, they had such a grander vision, and you would think, once again, like I kind of referenced earlier in the show, like, you would put all your money toward Superman 4 and Masters of the Universe. Like, you'd cut out doing a couple other movies and put that toward the big movies that might have made you a huge profit. But Canon was like, nope, we can't do that. We'll give you 17 as opposed to, like, 2 million. Like, we're using for, like, 5 other movies we have in production right now.
Jesus Christ. I mean, it was doomed to fail. I mean, without question.
Yes. And I mean, I will say, in terms of my general thoughts of Superman 4, I would agree that I think it is quite bad. And it's not, like, the Canon film fun bad, necessarily. I think there are moments of that, like with the special effects. And, like, I would say with a couple other weird plot developments, like even how the nuclear arms race thing starts, where it's like they have the president on TV just saying, like, well, it looks like the talks didn't go through very well, and, you know, we don't know what to do, so we want to be second to none, so it's like, oh no, nuclear tensions are rising, and they cut to a classroom where this teacher, for some reason, is just, like, having the kids watch this elementary school kids, and it's just like, oh, hey, all you elementary school kids, what do you think we should do? How do you think we should resolve this? And there's that one fucking kid in the back, where everyone's like, oh, he wasn't listening, don't call on him, and this little kid has the voice of, like, a 35-year-old man suddenly, and
Yes.
it's just like, I know what we should do, let's call Superman.
Yep.
Like, what?
Yep. Absolutely. I'm sorry. What was that? Speak up, son. I said Superman said he wouldn't do it. It's so fucking good. It's so good.
And that kid's like a recurring character in like the first half of the movie where like he goes to the UN where Superman is, and Superman's just like, hey Jimmy, I'm gonna go up there with you. Just like, thanks Superman, I really appreciate it. Golly gee willikers.
Thanks for looking out, you fuck. Yep. Yeah, I can't stand that kid's voice.
So there's bits like that, and there's also like weird logic leap stuff that I find fascinating about this movie. Like early on, how Nuclear Man is created is that Lex Luthor is touring a museum, and he goes over to like where they have a strain of Superman's hair on display, and it's holding up a ball that literally says it weighs like 1,000 pounds. And he's like, oh, I'm going to finally get this hair so I can clone Superman with it. And then he breaks the glass, and then using the bolt cutters that he used to break open the glass, he cuts Superman's hair that's strong enough to hold up the fucking ball? Like, what? Isn't Superman's hair a bit more indestructible than that?
I mean, you would think. You would hope that a normal fucking pair of bolt cutters isn't enough to hurt Superman, because that's what they're implying.
Right, because there's that, and then there's also, I love, Mariel Hemingway plays, like, Superman's, Clark Kent's love interest throughout the movie. And there's a point where Nuclear Man, during the final fight, after it is in space, comes down, kidnaps her, and brings her into to space without any protection. And she's just fine. She's literally panting in deep space, and she's totally fine.
I know, you want to see it happen, like how, when fucking the Grand Maw got kicked out into space in Avengers, where she instantly freezes and starts cracking. That's what I was hoping
Brian De Palma's
for.
mission to Mars with
Yep.
Robbins, yeah.
I was going to say that, but I didn't know if you would get the. I don't know if you've seen it.
I 100% get that reference, yeah.
Yeah. It's fucking terrifying.
Yep. It's the only part I remember about that fucking movie anyway. But yeah, like, there's stuff like that I find very fun, but the problem is that this one is also trying to do a lot of, like, that charming, witty stuff that's from the original Donner movies, which is kind of what makes those movies for me. Is like, at the same time, they have these, like, big, grand, epic visions. There's, like, sweet, intimate moments. Like, one of my favorite scenes in, like, just fucking movies in general is the whole, like, interview that turns into the flying thing with Lois Lane and Superman. It's a wonderful bit in that movie. It's so, like, great, romantic, cinematic, fantastical, beautiful. And they do a beat-for-beat version of it here, and it fucking sucks. It sucks so much.
But then he can kiss her, and she loses her memory.
Right, to be fair,
that.
that's from Superman 2.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I just don't get it. I don't get it.
And that's one of my few problems with Superman 2 in general as well. Just that weird kiss thing. I've never been a fan of that in general.
Yeah,
with
what's
these
the
movies.
other power? What's the other power he has in this? Where you're like,
well,
wait,
the time
what?
travel thing that's in the end of the first movie, where he's able to, like, turn the world around.
Right, which would just cause utter chaos and destruction. But there's something else in this one. I forget what it is now. God damn it.
Well, there's a couple, because there's my favorite, like, another one of my favorite bits is during one fight where they're going around the world, like him and Nuclear Man fighting each other, and they break part of, like, the Great Wall of China, and then Superman just stares at it, and it, like, stop motion rebuilds itself.
That's the one. That's the one. Yeah, they're like, wow, what a miracle. He's like, see you later, folks. It's so fucking stupid.
There's a lot, and also his freeze breath, which, like, they had done previously, and it's, like, a lot more, like, subtle in the other movies as opposed to bad animated, like, cold breath comes out of him in this one, and, like, stops the magma in Italy, and they're like, Mamma mia, you did it! Oh my god, I can't believe the Superman! Like, that happens. And then, like, the real sadness here to me, I think, as you mentioned earlier, Christopher Reeve, obviously, like, he came onto this, he wanted to do, like, the nuclear arms race thing. You can tell that, like, he does care, but that makes it a lot sadder. Because I think there are points where he's, like, fully invested, like when he does the big United Nations speech. That feels like he's totally invested in doing that. And he actually has, like, a lot of the gravitas that you liked about him in the earlier movies. But then there are very clear points, especially when Nuclear Man comes into this, where he just looks, like, defeated. He's just like, fuck, what am I doing?
No, I completely agree. Half of this movie, Christopher was like, this is fucking great. We're kind of maybe getting a message across. This is a story I wanted to tell. I love it. The other half, he's like, I gotta fight this fucking tool bag. Who's in the suit? That's my other great love of this movie. Gene Hackman's making, and I got this, whatever he calls it, I forget, this proto sample of tissue, and we just put it in this box here, and then cut some fabric, and well, that's not going to be the fabric. Actually, the machine will make the fabric grow, and it'll be actually covered and responsible. Like, I like it. Like, what? Wait a minute. So he gets shot into the sun, and the sun grows that suit around his body?
Well, right, because it starts off as, like, a zygote, and then a fetus starts developing in a weird womb in space, and then he turns into Nuclear Man complete with suit.
Yeah, complete with suit. I wish that he would he would have came out of that and like half of him in cloth and be like, kill me.
Well, it is fun you mentioned that because there was apparently a whole thing shot where they had an original prototype Nuclear Man. Like, there was a solid, like, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes of this movie where there was a different Nuclear Man that showed up and looks completely different, and Superman fights him and easily defeats him. And then this is supposed to be the second Nuclear Man. This is trial 2 that they completely cut out of the movie.
Oh, good for them. Still doesn't work because if he gets out of the sunlight at all, he fucking bails and shuts down.
Which is such a great power source. Because, like, obviously that's the thing with Superman is, like, he gets his power from the sun. But it's not like you close the blinds and he's just like, I'm out of it. Unlike Nuclear Man.
Right, God forbid it's a cloudy day.
Right.
It's going to have a problem.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other stuff, like the recreations they try and do of the earlier Superman movies, like when you go to the Kent farm, and it looks clearly just like, oh, this is a very bad set, especially inside the interior, when he finds, like, his initial rocket that is narrated, for some reason now, by his mother, Susanna York, from the original movie, because, shockingly, they couldn't get Brando back.
Big shocker, Brando didn't want to do it. He probably would have, though. You know, honestly, give me a carton of cigarettes and some Krispy Kreme donuts. And they're like, no, we've already spent way too much money. Like, no
right,
way.
look, we just paid fucking Sylvester Stallone $10 million to do Cobra and Over the Top. We can't spare that for you.
Yeah, no, fuck that. Okay, I'll do it for one crawler. No, we don't have it in the budget. Our budget was shrank.
We lost half our money before we started filming.
Let me just lick your fingers after breakfast. No, goddammit. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, so not only do you get his mother, which whatever, fine, but then you get all these other random Kryptonians who, forever, 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 forever.
Yes, that's my favorite. In the Fortress, in that Fortress of Solitude set, which looks so much worse than, like, in the earlier movies. It was like big, grand crystal, like, hideaway.
And this, it's clearly like a matte painting.
Yep, mostly matte painting.
I mean, clearly.
And yeah, that one, the elders who are just like, no, we can't have people invest all of their hope into one person Superman. That'll never work. Just like, guys, he's been doing this for, like, I don't know, a decade now.
Right,
And
he's fucking Superman, bro.
Right.
I mean, you guys are dead. Shut the fuck up. Like, what do you got to do with anything?
The thing is, I would say, at least with some of the, like, fun silliness that's there and some of the ambitious elements of it, I wouldn't say it's, like, the worst even of, like, Superman movies. Because we mentioned Superman 3. I would also say I prefer this to say, like, a Batman v Superman, which is, like, oppressive and, like, 3 hours long darkness bullshit to me.
Oof. I mean, I don't agree nor disagree. I got to sit with that one a little bit. I prefer it to Superman Returns.
I mean, I would probably put it around Superman Returns to me, because that movie, like, it looks...
There's several reasons why I don't like Superman Returns 2 in particular.
I can't imagine, like, 2 specific creative people involved with that movie that you wouldn't want to talk about that movie for.
Both are male, and both of their last names start with S.
That's true. Good point. Those are the biggest problems with that movie. But yeah, I think that movie just has the weird problem. Like, it looks a lot better and it's more professional production, but it has no life in it whatsoever, and it feels almost like we're wasting an interesting opportunity with, like, getting a clean slate. Versus, like, here, this one is definitely bad, and it feels like it's very much an embarrassing whimper of a note for, like, this weird series of movies to end on. But at the same time, I at least have, like, a few moments where I perk up with, like, oh wow, this is fucking dumb. Like, the 3 guys that Luthor meets with all the time, 2 of which are William Hootkins, aka Porkins, and also that one guy from Batman, the one detective who gets shot, or not in Batman, and also a very young Jim Broadbent, like, with hair, which was weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
But when they, like, meet up with those guys, and Luthor's just like, oh, look, let me show off the sun so I can introduce Nuclear Man. And Hootkins literally, like, shields his eyes, like, oh, the sun, it's burning my eyes. Bullshit like that.
So yuck.
Or when, like, Nuclear Man comes by and he demonstrates in front of those guys with, like, Luthor just like, oh, look, like, your money's good here, don't worry. He puts up, like, $100 bill, and Nuclear Man burns it, and it's a fake-ass Luthor in, like, the foreground, and the hand quickly goes off frame. It's so bad. Like there are those glimmering moments of stupidity that I find this kind of like not like I said, not consistently like fun bad, but at the same time more entertaining to me than some of the worser Superman movies, in my opinion.
Now I kind of see why you're saying you put it at the level of Super Returns. I think I gotta agree because there is promise here, and it's just they really fumbled the ball. And I mean, obviously the budget being cut and sort of all that has a lot to do with it, and the need to have another superpowered villain and all that stuff. Like I get that. Where Superman Returns is just because they wanted to make a fucking carbon copy love letter to the Donner movie.
It's $100 million fan film is what Superman
Oh,
Returns is.
yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing, it's just that, like, especially with, like, the history of superhero movies, I think also factors into this, where in this weird context where, like, oh, we're getting lower and lower budgets with every sequel, versus now when we have a superhero franchise, where it's just like, no, we have to put as much money as possible into, like, I don't know, the fucking, like, Justice League, or, like, this weird, like, sort of, like, either the Aquaman / Batman movie and all this other stuff, where we're trying so hard to have, like, this weird interconnectivity and trying to be this, like, big, massive, epic production. I kind of prefer to have the charm of, like, it's a 90-minute really shitty, poorly produced movie. That feels at least a bit more novel to me now, as opposed to, like, what we would get at this point, where, like, the bad special effects are just, like, big CGI gray balls.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there's some other stuff. Like, I would say, like, probably the low point of this movie to me overall is, like, the whole sitcom style, like, oh, Superman and Clark Kent have to go on a double date at the same time with Lois and Mariel Hemingway, is, like, probably, like, the complete low point of this movie, where they have to do some, like, fucking farcical bullshit where just like, oh, I gotta go down and pay the cab, Clark Kent, and then all of a sudden Superman's up on the ledge. And so I think that's, like, the absolute, because that's the stuff where, when it's trying to recreate sort of that fun comedic charm of those earlier movies, it falls so flat with, like, that, or fucking Margot Kidder's only, like, running bit of this movie is that she learned French for a trip to Paris that didn't happen.
Yep, pretty great.
And all the stuff with, like, the Daily Planets being bought up by a weird conglomerate guy who is Mariel Hemingway's father. And it's just like, I want to run this like it's the tabloids and all this other shit. Just like, I don't really give a fuck about any of this.
You absolutely don't give a fuck about any of it. It's ridiculous. It's just, yeah, no, this is a terrible movie.
Yeah, it's but then something inspiredly dumb will happen, like the fight on the moon, Adam.
Yeah, pretty great. One of the worst choreographed fight scenes ever. It's so bad.
And it's also in slow motion, so because it's just like, oh, we have to take the moon's gravity into effect here. It's like, no, you really didn't. You really fucking didn't. They're super people. They doesn't matter.
On the fingernails. Oh god. Okay. Yeah. No.
Right, and the awkward inserts of the fingernails growing on with, like, really bad, like, plastic fingers.
Oh, clearly plastic fingers.
Yeah,
it looks like the
100%.
type of things that you can buy at, like, Halloween for kids that they could just stick on their fingers and it makes them have, like, witch fingers or they're longer. That's exactly what it looks like.
But I guess before we get to final thoughts, Adam, this is, like I mentioned, kind of one of the movies that helped end canon films. Do you feel that, like, feels like an appropriate sort of, like, end point from where we were at with canon? Do you feel like this is kind of like what we were leading to this whole time, is like a bloated budget mess like this or Masters of the Universe to really sink it by the end of the 80s, a couple years later?
Yes, I do. I feel like, obviously they started putting all their eggs in the licensed material sort of basket. The Supermans, the Masters of the Universes, what they originally wanted to do with the Texas Chainsaw Massacres, which put a pin on that. But they just sank so much money into name recognition that, well, it's Superman 4, of course it's going to make us a ton of money. Or it's Master of the Universe, of course it's going to make us money. It's Spider-Man, of course it's going to make us money. And it just killed them. That's when it, solely became just about the name and not the product.
I think I would agree with that, if not for the fact that these were, like, only 3 of, like I said, the 30 movies that came out literally in just 87. Where you, like, I'll just list off a couple fucking names here, Adam, of movies that also came out in the same year from canon. Alan Quartermain, The Lost City of Gold, Over the Top, The Barbarians, Street Smart, Beauty and the Beast, Rumpelstiltskin, American Ninja 2, The Confrontation, Sleeping Beauty, King Lear, that's right, from fucking Zeffirelli. That was also this fucking year. Barfly, Death Wish 4, The Crackdown. Like, that was just a few of the movies that were like at this time, where I think the problem is that not necessarily, oh, they're putting all their eggs into one basket with like the licensed property thing, as opposed to they were putting way too much eggs in several baskets. And they just, all those baskets fell through and all the eggs cracked really badly.
I mean, yeah. Well, first of all, paying Sly Stallone $10 million. Like, I mean, I got nothing against Sly, I guess, but good Lord.
Yeah, especially for Over the Top, of all things.
Ugh.
Which is a movie I 100% want to cover on this show at some point.
It's so dumb.
That movie's so fucking dumb in the best way.
It's
I love
so
Over the Top. For sure. And also, like, Cobra was around the same time. Yeah, it became very clear that they were stretching themselves way too thin, and thus the whole company would collapse by the very end of the 80s. With all that. But Adam, yeah, let's, we got to do some of our stuff for our weekly segment. So let's do some quick final thoughts. Do you have anything else to say about Superman 4, The Quest for Peace?
It's just a bad film. It's not good. It doesn't work and meant for many levels. It's boring. It's not good, bad. It's like you said, it's not like canon, bad, charming. None of that. It's ultimately almost depressing. Watching it. It's just nope.
Yeah, it's a depressing note, not just for necessarily like canon, where this feels the most like them trying to do a Hollywood big budget movie, and it feels just more embarrassing as opposed to creatively bizarre, and in a way that's like really like sad to see for them, and also obviously Christopher Reeve, given this is his last Superman movie, and not even a decade after this, his tragic accident happened. So it definitely feels like it's kind of like an ending note sadly for his career, really. He said as much, like he feels that after this, his career kind of like faded off. And it's a bummer because we've talked plenty of times of his other non-Superman roles where he's tremendous and he was a great underappreciated actor in his time. But yeah, this feels, I would say it's still not the worst Superman movie or even worse like DC movie necessarily for me of those adaptations. But it's near there. It's very close to there in a way. But there's just enough like interesting ideas about the nuclear arms race thing, or like spits and spurts of like fun, entertaining bad stuff that make it at least like not the worst to me, but still pretty not good, to say the least. But now, Adam, let's get to our weekly segment, the Double Redo. Double Redo.
Double Redo. Double Redo. Double Redo. Double Redo. Double Redo.
That works. So the Double Redo is a segment that Adam and I do every week, in which we bring up a good and a bad pick related to the topic we're doing. In this case, we each have a good and a bad canon film recommendation. And Adam, you're going first with your choices.
Alrighty. So for the good, I have a movie that I think is not only one of the best sequels of all time, but maybe the best of this sort of beloved yet messy franchise. I have the Tobe Hooper Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. It is a fucking cartoon of a movie. It is wacky, it is silly, it is darkly comedic, and sometimes just outright slapstick comedic. It's just fucking nuts. Everybody in it is great. Caroline Williams, out of control, clearly under the influence, Dennis Hopper. Bill Moseley just being as Bill Moseley can be, and only Bill Moseley can be. You got the grandpa, just everything in this movie is fucking crazy, and it works, and it's funny and nutty and horribly gory at times, and grisly violent and dirty, disgusting, wacky. It's just everything about it works. And some of the greatest sets. I mean, their underground lair that they have, it's fucking great. I mean, it creates this whole world for the Sawyers. It's just fucking wonderful. I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. It's another movie I have a poster of, signed by Bill Moseley nonetheless. I absolutely will watch it anytime it's on. It's so fucking fun. It's the movie that they signed Tobe Hooper up for, because they're like, oh, he's going to make another Texas Chainsaw movie. Oh, and that movie's regarded as one of the scariest movies of all time. He can do it again for us, and he gave them this. and none of them expected it. Nobody expected it. It's just a wacky fucking comedy, basically, and I love it, every piece of it to death. And for my bad, I have a movie that was originally made by Canon, but it was near the end, so it was sort of picked up by MGM and distributed by MGM. But it's a Jean Claude Van Damme movie, Death Warrant. Death Warrant was one of the movies when I was a kid that was like, this is like the hardcore action movie. Like this is the one that like you shouldn't be watching. Like because we were allowed to watch a bunch of the other ones, but this one was like one of the ones maybe not because with the prison and all the stuff that happens in it. And you watch it now, and it's just really dumb and tame and stupid. Like there's a couple good moments to it, but for the most part, it's just really really bad and sort of cliche. Cop undercover in prison movie, and it's just there's a lot of implications with a lot of things that I don't really want to get into because it makes me feel dirty. It's pretty lousy. It's just a chance for Van Damme to have his shirt ripped off in prison fights. Basically, it's not even it's not even shot well. Like that's one of the biggest problems you could do with a martial arts action movie. If you can't see what the fuck is happening, if you could barely see the fighting and all that stuff, then what's the point? And this one is definitely guilty of that.
Yeah, I have not seen Death Warrant, though it's interesting. I will say that it was, like you said, it was produced for Canon, and then it basically like came out right after it went under. So MGM released it theatrically with Pathé, which is one of the British companies that Canon bought. That's another weird part of their history, by the way, that they bought up like 40% of the British like studios and the actual movie theater chains as well over there. So that was part of their weird spending habits like by the mid 80s. So that kind of like was a result of that deal. But I have not seen that particular movie. Though I have seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. We talked about it on a previous episode. And I mean, I would say I do love it alongside the original Texas Chainsaw. If anything, I would say 2 just works fascinating as like a reaction to the original Texas Chainsaw, where it came out 12 years later. There had been some attempts to make another Texas Chainsaw that never worked out. So then Canon was like, hey, Toby Hooper, we're going to give you a lot of money to do that, as well as Life Force and Invaders from Mars, which are also both great. If you have not seen those people, those are both fascinating and bizarre and weird. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, it feels like so much more of a reaction, where it's like after the whole slasher craze had happened, and it was a reaction to the original Texas Chainsaw not being that bloody. It's almost as if Toby Hooper's like, okay, well, if I'm going to do another one, I don't want to, but if I do, how about I make it a silly comedy that kind of parodies the original movie? And it's just filled with way more gore than the original ever had. It's a fascinating movie. It's divisive. And I mean, I get it with some people who are just like, oh, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me. But I agree with you firmly that I think it's much better than, a lot of the other sequels that would come out. I think like all the other sequels in that franchise just try to recreate the original movie in their own sort of way, versus this one is not trying to do that at all. And I kind of would have wished that if there had been more sequels in this vein, I would probably prefer Texas Chainsaw as a franchise a lot more than I ultimately do. But I have my choices here for Canon films, and my good pick is actually one I would genuinely say, no joke, is a great pick. It might be my favorite Canon film of all these, because I recently watched it as part of prep for this episode. It is called Runaway Train from 1985. Basic premise is that it follows 2 prisoners who escape from a maximum security prison, who are played by Eric Roberts and John Voight. And they escape from prison and get onto a train that, as they're getting onto it, the person who is actually running it has a heart attack and dies, but the train starts going on its own, so it's a literal runaway train, and it's all about these people trying to stop this train while at the same time knowing that, like, oh, there are a couple people on here we don't know they're escaped prisoners yet, because there's a third stowaway played by Rebecca De Mornay, who works on the train, who's also on there. So it's a weird thing of people in the control booths trying to control everything, while at the same time this train's literally running away. And also John P. Ryan, who's a great character actor we talked on the show previously, plays the incredibly insane warden out to get Voight and Eric Roberts back to prison. And it's made by a guy named Andrei Kachovsky. I apologize if I mispronounced that, but he was a Russian filmmaker who would later make Tango and Cash, one of our favorites, Adam, later in the decade. And but this movie, it doesn't have any of that big macho machismo like at its core necessarily. There's elements of that. Like the most canon-y moments in this movie are the big prison riots that happen, and some of the stuff where it's like the various people in the control booth, which includes T.K. Carter, who many would know from The Thing, amongst other things, and Kenneth McMillan, who was the original version of Baron Harkonnen. And like that stuff has some of the canon kind of like fun kitschiness, but as much as I don't really especially like John Voight as a fucking person right now, he's so fucking great in this movie. And so is Eric Roberts. Like, Eric Roberts and Voight have become such jokes in recent years. It's weird going back to, like, this 80s period and watch these performances that got them Oscar nominations, like, genuinely. Like, they were nominated for Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and the movie also got a Best Editing nomination. I get it. It's a really thrilling adventure kind of movie that also has a lot of, like, pathos to it about, like, the prison industrial complex, and it's a kick-ass action movie at the same time. There's some amazing special effects work with, like, the rear matting and stuff for, like, the actual train running wild and, like, the model shots. Lots of, like, trains, like, getting fucking run over by this runaway train that looked fucking spectacular. It's a genuinely great movie that I was, like, genuinely, like, almost, like, emotionally verklempt by the end of it. It's just an amazing movie that, like, if anyone wants to, like, decry canon, you know, it's just like, oh, they just made schlock. They made also just these interesting movies. Like, this kind of fits in with the weird projects they would also finance, like Street Smart or the Cassavetes movies they'd finance as well, where it's like, no, they made a couple of genuinely great, like, non-schlocky entertainments that I would firmly recommend, including Runaway Train, which is phenomenal. And then for my bad, we kind of referenced some of these, like, fairy tale adaptations they did in, like, the late 80s. Like, you know, they did Snow White, Rumpelstiltskin, a couple of these, like, canon fairy tales, I believe they were marketed as. They're kind of, like, trying to appeal to, like, more of a kid-centric audience. And I have one of those here as my bad pick, which is Puss in Boots, which is an adaptation of the old fairy tale Puss in Boots, in which a young man, in this case, Jason Connery, son of Sean, is bequeathed a cat from his father after he passes away, and he carries around this cat, and he's like, oh, I don't know, I wish I had some kind of, like, bigger life out there in the kingdom and whatnot, and this cat suddenly gets boots that are left over by the guy he puts on those boots, and he becomes a human, in this case, Christopher Walken, who shows up just like, hello, I'm a cat, with my great Christopher Walken impression there. It's like he was in the room, but it's just literally this version of the story that's like a musical and everything that is mostly just kind of like very diary. It was 88, so it's like a year after Superman 4, and the budget shows. It's very much like stripped down. The musical numbers are bad. Anyone, like most anyone who's on, like, in center stage when the cat isn't around are like, whatever, I don't care. These, like, this is like bad children's theater. But Walken, this feels like one of the earliest examples of sort of like the meme comedy performances of Walken, where like he is just so full of like that Walken-y joy whenever he's dancing or singing these terrible songs, and he's making these weird bizarre faces that feels like he's the guy who's at like the children's matinee performance who actually wants to entertain the kids. And it's like, fuck yeah, dude, you're having a lot of fun, and I love watching you. Like, I wouldn't recommend necessarily watching this whole movie. It's like 100 minutes long, and like I said, whenever it's not focused on Walken, it's dire. But man, there's some fucking clips of some of these fucking songs and some of these bits where Walken is just like, oh no, my master, look, he's down there, someone help him, and doing all these like very silly bits that are just like entertaining enough to watch as like a YouTube compilation almost. But yeah, so overall, Puss in Boots, not a canon high point.
So I've never seen either of these. I do want to see Runaway Train, and I really like the Soul Asylum song that's based on.
They time travel 10 years to steal the premise of it and it came back. That song about what? Really... Like, isn't that about like kids who went missing or some shit, right?
Yeah, something like that.
But I mean, and that's saying a lot considering you are very much not a fan of Voight, regardless of politics or not. You hate that dude just in general.
I can't fucking stand John Voight, but I love me some Eric Roberts. So, I mean, he's a talking cat.
No, that's the other movie that I had.
No. I gotta see it, man. I've heard great things, even on that documentary when they show clips of it. You're like, this looks pretty fucking good. So yeah, that's one I'll definitely check out. I think I'm gonna avoid Puss in Boots at all costs. It sounds fucking terrible. But yeah, they did have canon fantasy.
In doing the research, I think I realized, like, I looked at the Rumpelstiltskin when they did with Billy Barty, and I'm like, I think I saw this as a child.
I think I've seen that one.
Right, because I think that might have been my first exposure to the great little person actor Billy Barty, who's always amazing, for sure.
But yeah, man, canon, again, in closing on canon in general, it's such a fun sort of library of films to sort of go down, and you'll discover some gems in there. You're going to see some of the worst movies you've ever seen, but there are some genuine, real gems in there. And that's more you could say about, other, I guess like Trauma and Full Moon and all that. Like, yeah, there's some gems, but there's way more bad than good. And I think canon's about a good 50-50.
Yeah, and even some of those like bad ones are still entertainingly like bad to a
Right.
certain extent, I would say. Yeah, right. I don't think this will be the last time we cover a canon film. Dan.
Can't do it.
It cannot. Can
Oh,
with two
man.
N's not.
You are just on point tonight.
Oh, perfect. The Golden Globe is smiling down upon me with this. But let's go ahead and repeat our titles for everybody out there in case they missed them. Adam.
My good is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and my bad was Death Warrant.
And my good was Runaway Train, and my bad was Puss in Boots, not from the Shrek franchise.
Which, by the way, also the Puss in Boots from the Shrek franchise is pretty fucking terrible too. So
No, the Antonio Banderas is a fun job. At least
no,
the second one.
his own movie.
Oh right, yes, the original. I kind of forgot. Like they're doing a sequel now, which is weird.
Yeah,
like,
I think,
so many
and I
years
think it's
later.
straight to streaming as far as I
No,
know.
it is theatrical. That's the weird thing. It's like coming
Oh
out
dear
in
God, that's
theaters.
way worse. Why?
I don't know, but though for the record, I will say the animation looks a lot better than I was expecting. It's like a weird stylized like Spider-Verse type thing, and I'm like,
great.
It looks shockingly good animation wise. And then they just talk, and it's like, oh,
It's probably by the guys
who.
who did like Bad Guys or something like that.
Right, yeah, which was very good from DreamWorks out there. But that's a discussion for a completely different time, guys. It's time we started getting to the end of this episode, but stay tuned as we'll be talking about our picks for next week. We'll be deciding those at the end of the episode, so stay tuned for that. We want to thank some people first, like Chris Oliver for intro and outro music for the show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thor Lally for our artwork. Follow him at Night of Water. That's night with a K _of_water. On various socials out there. And thanks to our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/DEDBpod, where for just $1 a month, you all get to vote in polls for specific movies and episode topics that we cover, and also you get to listen to bonus podcasts. We release at least one every month, and the big one we'll be putting out by the end of November is going to be an edition of Television, in which Adam and I recommend each other a TV show we have not seen before to watch at least the first season of. So you'll be hearing Adam discover my pick to him of The Rehearsal, and me discovering his pick to me of Cobra Kai.
I'm still very curious of what your thoughts on Cobra Kai are going to be. This is the first time that we've done this sort of television thing where I'm like, I don't know if Thomas is going to like this or not. Everything else we've done, I was pretty sure I had a hit on my hands, but this one I do not know.
Well, I mean, I'll just say that I've at least gotten about halfway through the first season, but you'll have to hear our thoughts and contribute that $1 to find out that, and also Adam discovering The Rehearsal, which I'm also very curious about. Because I guess it's more...
Yeah, I'm going to watch it.
Right.
I'm going to binge it tomorrow.
Right, which I'm very fascinated by, if nothing else, because I think you'll be fascinated by it either way. I just don't know if you'll like it either on like a television show level or even like on a moral level based on the weird directions that goes. I'll be very curious to hear about that, as anyone out there, if you are, just contribute that $1. You'll be able to hear that by the end of November. But if you want to find us on various different places, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or if it fucking exists, Twitter. Just now, like we were recording this within hours after the announcement that most of Elon Musk's Twitter staff has bailed, and the site might break within a week. So if it's still up, we're on there too at DEDBpod.
And we're verified. That's what we used your Patreon money for.
Sure, of course. I mean, by the time this episode comes up, it'll be destroyed, so you won't know if we were verified or
Right.
not. No one will know.
Yeah.
Right.
But we were.
In our hearts, we were. But yeah, at DEDBpod on all those socials, and also doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com if you want to submit feedback to us via email. And you can also find me on, if it's still around, Twitter, as well as definitely Letterboxd, which still is much more stable a social media platform. I'm at NotTheWho'sTommy at those places. And I also do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com and at film-cred.com.
And you can find me on Instagram at Atom or Adam. That's ATOM_OR_ADEAN. And you can find me on Letterboxd at Schwanson. That's SCHWANDTSON.
And to hear more of our audio antics, follow and subscribe to us on places like Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere else you get your podcasts out there. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, the great network we're a part of, I might listen to all the other great shows out there. But you could also dig into our archives on our Podbean main feed for like 200 episodes before we ever joined Talk Film Society. And if nothing else, if you can't support us on the Patreon, even that dollar can be tight for some people, totally get it. The totally free way to help us out is to rate, review, or simply share the show around because it gets us more visibility out there.
Yeah, some of y'all still do that for us, and we appreciate it. We love you. The rest of you, get off your fucking asses.
Day one, homies. We appreciate you.
Yep, for sure. Catch y'all up at Doug's Mansion.
And now, Adam, it's time we end the show as we normally do with doing our picking for the next episode. So every week, Adam and I each have either 2 good or 2 bad movies. We switch up on the quality for those. And we assign each of them a number between 1 and 10. Basically the other person will say, like, you know what, I'm going to pick number 6, for example. And the other person will be like, okay, that's closest to number 5, which had this particular pick at that number. But there is something here called the Godfather rule, which we were given vetoes back at our last anniversary in May to use once a single veto that we had to use before the next anniversary come next May. So if we hear that choice at like number 6 or whatever, and we're like, you know what, I don't want to cover that movie, the person can say, actually, I'll take the cannoli. And thus that pick is gone. We have to go with whatever other choices on the opposite end of things. At least for those of us who have vetoes still. I used mine a couple weeks ago. I have no ability to use a veto, but Adam can do that for my 2 bad choices for the next episode. Though I'm not sure if you would be able to, because I'm not sure if you know what these 2 movies are.
Probably have 0 idea.
The topic that we're doing, which we should mention, shout out to our patrons over at patreon.com/DEDBpod, picked this particular topic because we're still in Revember. This will be the last episode of Revember, where we revisit some familiar topics throughout the month that we've done previously. And this one that the patrons decided to have us revisit is anime films. A topic that we're not necessarily, like Lucinda Dickey and Ninja 3 The Domination, we're not as versed in Japanese culture, necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, at all. I know very, very little about anime.
Yes, for sure on that. But I have the 2 bad picks for this. You have the 2 good. So I'm very curious, Adam, for your 2 good picks, I'm going to pick number 10.
Okay, at number 9, I have, which might be my first major exposure to anime. If not, it's probably the first one that I realized I was watching something that, wasn't straightforward, typical sort of Western animation style. I have the classic sci-fi masterpiece that is Akira.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely seen Akira. Great movie, for sure. Definitely one of the more famous anime movies out there, definitely. But what was your other choice, Adam?
At number 2, I have one that I think I've seen. If not, I've definitely seen clips, and I've definitely seen homages to it in other mainstream movies. I have the other, considered a classic, Perfect Blue.
Oh, I fucking love Perfect Blue. Satoshi Kon, one of my favorite filmmakers, regardless of anime or not. I want to cover one of his movies at some point, and that one would have been a great one, but totally down for
fucking bad. Well, sorry.
Yes, sure. Well,
now,
Adam,
your fucking veto, you fucking moron.
Well, we'll see if you might use yours for my 2 bad picks, Adam, but please pick a number between 1 and 10.
I'll go the opposite. I'll go number 2.
Okay. At number 3, I had a 90s one that I think I vaguely remember at least seeing when I was younger, that had a sort of infamous production in its own right, and has had at least very mixed reception out there from a lot of people. I have the American-Japanese co-production of Little Nemo in Slumberland from, I believe, 1992.
Okay, I've heard of this. I don't know. I don't think I've seen it, but I've definitely heard that title before.
Well, I mean, it's based on like the old like American comics that were like from the 1900s
no,
or whatever.
I'm not going to take the veto. I'm very curious on it, so we'll go for it.
All right. Well, on the other end of things, over at number 9, I had one of the various Netflix anime ones, which I polled a bunch of my anime friends who were just like, "Hey, do you have a bad anime movie to recommend?" And unanimously, a lot of them said this one called Firework that came out a couple of years ago from the same people who made Your Name, which I have seen and is a great anime movie. But this one I've heard just bad things about.
I've never even heard of that. Big shocker.
I hadn't heard of Firework before because, shockingly, a Netflix one I haven't heard before that got released amongst like 500 other movies that one week. Weird. I can't imagine I hadn't heard of it before. But yeah, so Little Nemo in Slumberland and Akira. Very fascinating for our next episode. But until then, everybody, you just gotta watch out for those possessed ninjas, especially if they're rotating around while you're trying to exorcise them.
Yeah, doing a bunch of wacky flips and shit.